What if the very institutions designed to protect our economy, the ones we trust with the stability of our financial lives, were in fact set up to serve a hidden agenda?
Hmm.
And what if the very concept of money, the dollars in your wallet, the numbers in your bank account, was at its core a grand illusion, kind of intricately woven to function in ways most of us never imagine?
That's a pretty provocative
Okay,
start.
let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a fascinating and, well, for many, deeply unsettling historical account.
Oh, yeah.
We're drawing specifically from the meticulously researched pages of The Creature from Jekyll Island, a book that promises to pull back the curtain on the surprising origins and ongoing profound impact of central banking and the Federal Reserve System.
Yeah, it's quite the read.
This isn't just about dusty historical documents. It's a journey through obscured history that aims to reveal how modern finance profoundly affects our lives today, the value of our labor, and, the trajectory of our society.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is how the author connects seemingly disparate events. It transforms what might appear to be dry economic history into a gripping drama, actually.
Right.
This deep dive is truly an exploration of concepts and principles that challenge conventional wisdom, inviting us to look beneath the surface and reconsider the foundations of our financial world.
Absolutely. And in this deep dive, we're going to cover quite a lot. We'll expose the secret meeting that, according to the source, birthed the Fed.
The Jekyll Island meeting itself.
Exactly. Then delve into the surprising and counterintuitive truth about how money is actually created in our modern system.
That's the mandrake mechanism part, which is mind-bending.
Totally. We'll unravel our mechanism of inflation, which the author describes as hidden tax.
A stealth tax, yeah.
And finally, connect these domestic financial systems to global power structures and even international conflicts, exploring how, in the author's view, they fundamentally reshape our world.
It really broadens the scope.
So get ready, because this material, as presented in The Creature from Jekyll Island, is designed to fundamentally change how you look at your money and the economic landscape around you.
Indeed. The author's work illustrates how seemingly complex financial systems operate in ways that are, at their core, surprisingly simple, yet profoundly impactful.
Simple but impactful.
Often in ways that, the author argues, benefit a select few at the expense of the many. Our mission today is to distill these insights for you, the listener, providing a shortcut to being well-informed on this crucial topic.
So let's set the scene for part one, which we're calling The Secret Origins of the Creature. Our journey begins in the shadows, not in a grand hall or a public forum, but on a remote island off the coast of Georgia back in 1910.
Jekyll Island.
Yes. The stage for what would become the Federal Reserve System was set during an incredibly clandestine gathering.
It was, by all accounts presented in the book, a meeting shrouded in extreme secrecy, designed to evade any public or media scrutiny whatsoever. 7 powerful men convened there.
And these weren't just like influential figures.
Yeah. No. They were architects of American finance and policy. We're talking about Senator Nelson Aldrich. At the time, he was a Republican whip in the Senate, held the crucial position of chairman of the National Monetary Commission.
Which was specifically tasked with studying banking reform.
Exactly. And it's worth noting, he was also John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s father-in-law. Shows you the connections.
Right, the interwoven nature of money and power.
Then there was Henry P. Davison, a senior partner of J.P. Morgan Company, a titan of Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
Charles D. Norton, president of First National Bank of New York, another pillar of the banking establishment. A. Piatt Andrew, who served as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, so government involvement right there.
Okay.
Frank A. Vanderlip, president of National City Bank of New York, and notably, representing William Rockefeller's interests, John D.'s brother.
So multiple Rockefeller connections.
Yes. Benjamin Strong, who headed J.P. Morgan's Bankers Trust Company. He's a key figure, later becomes the first head of the powerful Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
We'll definitely come back to him.
And finally, a truly pivotal individual, Paul M. Warburg, partner in Kuhn Loeb & Company, representing the formidable Rothschild and Warburg banking dynasties from Europe.
Wow. That's an extraordinary lineup of power and influence. But the length that they went to conceal this meeting, as the source details, it's maybe even more fascinating than who was there.
Oh, absolutely. They concocted this elaborate cover story,
Yeah.
telling everyone they were simply going on a casual duck hunting trip.
A duck hunting trip.
Yeah. The book even notes that Paul Warburg, despite supposedly not knowing one end of a shotgun from the other, borrowed a firearm just to maintain the illusion.
That's almost comical if the implications weren't so serious.
It really highlights the extraordinary nature of their true agenda. Senator Aldrich's private railway car, the Elder Rich, was key to this whole charade.
That's so.
Well, as the train neared Raleigh, North Carolina, it would deliberately uncouple the Eldridge car onto a remote siding. This allowed the main train to continue to the terminal like nothing was up, ensuring no one would see these prominent figures getting off together. A short while later, the private car would discreetly join another southbound train, continuing its journey without attracting unwanted attention. This level of meticulous avoidance, the author argues, strongly implies that the true purpose was something they believed the public would vehemently oppose.
So clearly not about duck hunting. The source argues it was about something far more significant and, well, potentially self-serving. What was the real purpose of this meeting on Jekyll Island?
Simply put, the author contends it was to agree on the structure and operation of a banking cartel. A system designed by bankers, for bankers.
A cartel.
Yeah. The inherent goal of any cartel, as explained in The Creature from Jekyll Island, is to maximize profits by minimizing competition among its members.
Making it hard for newcomers.
Exactly. Making it exceedingly difficult for new competitors to enter the field, and crucially, utilizing the police power of the government to enforce the cartel agreement.
Using government power to back a private agreement.
That's the argument. In this specific instance, the book argues, the true purpose and the actual outcome of this meeting was to create the blueprint for what would become the Federal Reserve System. This wasn't some grassroots movement for reform.
No, it sounds more like a strategic consolidation of power.
That's the perspective presented.
A banking cartel.
Yeah.
That definitely sounds a bit more sinister than, a simple government initiative. What exactly was this bankers' utopia they were trying to create? What problems were they supposedly solving?
Well, the motivation, according to the book, stemmed from a series of devastating financial panics that had plagued the U.S. economy. You had 1873, 1884, 1893, and the really bad one in 1907.
Right, those were major crises.
They were. But these panics, often blamed on a weak financial system overall, were actually caused, the author argues, by currency drains on individual banks. Banks that were loaned up with practically no reserves left.
So it wasn't the system, it was weak banks, reckless banks.
That's the argument. Essentially, these were weak, often reckless banks. When depositors rushed to withdraw their money a bank run, these banks simply didn't have it. The problem wasn't a systemic flaw in the economy itself, but the speculative, irresponsible lending by individual banks.
Okay, so how does the cartel fix that, in their view?
The vision for a banker's utopia was a system where all banks, especially the smaller ones, would be forced to issue loans in the same ratio to their reserves, even if that ratio was tiny.
How does that help?
The idea was the amount of checks clearing between them would, over time, theoretically balance out. No single bank could then be blamed for failing because the fault under this new system could be shifted.
Shifted where?
To abstract concepts. Blame could be deflected onto the economy, government policy, interest rates, or even the capital system itself.
So it socializes the risk, protects the big players.
In essence, yes. It was a way to socialize the risk of individual bank failures, protecting the larger, more powerful cartel members from the consequences of their own practices. The goal, the author insists, was profit, not necessarily public welfare.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then. The author of The Creature from Jekyll Island asserts that these powerful figures hiding behind this hunting trip story were essentially redesigning the very foundation of American finance. Not, as the story usually goes, to stabilize it for the public good, but primarily to protect and enhance their own interests, ensuring their continued dominance and profitability.
Which raises that important question the book explores thoroughly. Why such extreme secrecy? If this was really about beneficial financial reform to stabilize the economy, why hide it so desperately?
Good point.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer level of concealment strongly suggests a private interest at play right from the start, not some purely altruistic effort.
So the creation of the Fed, in the author's view, wasn't driven by public demand.
No, but rather the culmination of strategic efforts by those who stood to benefit most from a centralized system controlling the nation's money supply.
And a key figure in all this, the intellectual force behind many of the ideas debated at Jekyll Island, was Paul Warburg. What was his specific role and influence, according to the source?
Paul Moritz Warburg. He was a leading member of M.M. Warburg and Company of Hamburg and Amsterdam, a very influential European banking family.
Right.
He'd only been in the U.S. for about 9 years, but with significant financial backing and influence from the Rothschild Group, he and his brother Felix got partnerships in the big New York firm Kuhn, Loeb and Company.
Okay.
Within 2 decades, the author notes, Paul Warburg became one of America's wealthiest individuals, eventually dominating the country's railroad system through his financial clout.
And he was pushing for a central bank.
Tirelessly. The book emphasizes he was a fervent advocate, bringing his European expertise over. Years before Jekyll Island, he published influential pamphlets laying the groundwork. Things like Defects and Needs of Our Banking System and A Plan for a Modified Central Bank.
So he was seeding the idea.
Absolutely. He meticulously argued for what he called an elastic money supply. This was radical for the time.
How so?
The existing system largely tied currency to gold or government bonds, finite things. Warburg's vision, heavily influenced by the German model, proposed a money supply based on commercial paper.
IOUs from corporations.
Essentially, yes, debt from businesses. This supply could expand and contract based on economic activity, not on a fixed asset like gold.
So his vision for an elastic money supply based on corporate debt rather than gold was foundational to the whole structure they were cooking up.
Precisely. His relentless advocacy set the intellectual climate for all the future discussions on banking legislation. He pushed for a system that could expand and contract the money supply at will based on the volume of corporate debt.
Which sounds flexible.
It sounds flexible, yes. It provided the theoretical framework for the creature they were about to unleash. A system promising stability and responsiveness, but which the author argues also gave immense unprecedented power to whoever controlled this elasticity. It was a vision of monetary control totally alien to the American financial system back then.
All right, let's pivot from those secret origins and dive into part 2. A crash course on the secret science of money. To really get what the Federal Reserve is about, as the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island emphasizes, we need to fundamentally rethink what money is, or maybe what it's become under this system.
Right.
We're talking about something the author dramatically calls the mandrake mechanism.
The mandrake mechanism. It's a term coined in the source to describe the, frankly, astonishing, almost magical way money is created in our modern banking system. It really defies common sense.
How does it work?
The crucial concept here, which the author hammers home again and again, is that money is not created first and then borrowed.
Yeah.
That's not how it happens. Instead, it springs into existence at the exact instant it is borrowed. And then paradoxically, it vanishes from existence when the debt is paid off.
Whoa. Wait. So money is created when you borrow it?
Exactly. It's a fundamental, almost alchemical shift from how we usually think about money, like it's a physical thing or stored value.
So what does this mean for us, the average person? When I take out a car loan or a mortgage or even use my credit card, the bank isn't just lending me money they already have, like from deposits.
That's the critical insight from the book. They are, in effect, creating it from scratch out of your promise to pay them back. Your IOU becomes the basis for new money. It's a stark difference from just lending out existing deposits, which is what most people assume.
That is quite a realization.
And the most compelling part is that the Federal Reserve's own publications, if you read them carefully, actually confirm this. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York, for instance, states pretty plainly in its own materials, quote, "Currency cannot be redeemed. The question of just what assets back Federal Reserve notes has little but bookkeeping significance."
So the paper money isn't backed by anything tangible?
Not in the way we might think. And furthermore, the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago explicitly states, quote, "Banks are creating money based on a borrower's promise to pay the IOU. Banks create money by monetizing the private debts of businesses and individuals. They monetize debt."
Monetizing debt. They turn debt into money.
Precisely. And what's truly fascinating, or perhaps alarming, is how this mechanism transforms mere debt into money, allowing banks to collect interest on something that literally did not exist until the loan was made.
Interest on nothing.
Well, interest on money they created at zero cost to themselves. This raises that profound moral question the author highlights using Thomas Jefferson. No one has a natural right to the trade of moneylender, but he who has money to lend.
Right. If you don't have money, you shouldn't be lending it.
But the mandrake mechanism, in this view, grants this exclusive privilege to collect interest on money that costs the lender nothing to create.
That's a truly profound point. It suggests this kind of modern financial alchemy where debt itself is the raw material for money, a constant engine creating new currency. How does this connect to fractional reserve banking? We hear that term a lot.
Okay, let's use a vivid analogy from the sword, the poker game analogy.
All right.
Imagine Charlie Smith, your friendly neighborhood banker, is holding $120 of poker players' money in a shoebox behind the counter. This money belongs to the players. They can cash in their chips anytime.
Makes sense.
Now, if Charlie's brother-in-law, Larry, comes in wanting to borrow $120 and Charlie just lends in the money straight from that shoebox.
Yeah.
You see the problem, right?
Yeah, that money isn't Charlie's to lend. It belongs to the poker players.
Exactly. Yet under fractional reserve banking, this is essentially what happens, just on a much grander, more complex scale.
So banks take our deposits, and instead of just keeping them safe, they lend out most of it, like 90% or more.
Correct. Even though those deposits technically still belong to the original depositors and can be demanded back anytime, it's like they're lending out money that isn't truly theirs to lend.
Wow.
Historically, the author traces this back to the old goldsmiths in Europe. Initially, they were just custodians of gold issuing paper receipts.
Like early banknotes.
Right. But they soon realized most people rarely came back for the actual gold. The paper receipts started circulating as money themselves.
Okay.
Sensing opportunity, these goldsmiths started issuing more receipts than the gold they actually had, lending out these phony receipts and collecting interest.
Ah, the birth of fractional reserve.
That's how fractional money emerged. Only a fraction of the paper was backed by real gold. This system, the book argues, is just fiat money in transition. It inevitably leads to pure fiat money, to paper money backed by nothing but government-decreed legal tender laws.
This sounds almost inherently unstable. What happens when loans go bad in this system? The source talks about the up-the-ante play and the rescheduling play.
These are key mechanisms the author highlights for how banks handle the risks. When a loan goes bad, the borrower can't pay, especially the interest.
Yeah.
The bank doesn't just write it off immediately. They might use the up-the-ante play. They roll over the loan, extend the terms. But if the borrower can't even pay the interest,
then what?
The bank creates more money out of nothing mandrake mechanism again and lends that new money to the borrower.
So the borrower uses new debt to pay interest on old debt.
Exactly. To pay the interest on the original loan and the new loan. This keeps the old bad loan looking like an active asset on the books, increases its apparent size, boosts future interest payments, and potentially turns a disaster into a major score for the bank.
That's clever bookkeeping. And the rescheduling play.
Similar concept, often used for bigger entities like nations. More new money is created out of nothing to cover interest payments, maybe even give the borrower extra funds to spend.
Which makes the bank's assets look bigger.
Right. Increases their interest income and crucially perpetuates the debt. It's a sophisticated sleight of hand where the problem of bad debt is solved by creating more debt, deepening the cycle.
So it's a constant cycle of creating more debt to service existing debt, inflating their own balance sheets with, well, newly created fictitious money. This means the system inherently creates more debt than there is actual money to pay it back.
That's precisely the critical and alarming observation the author makes. By its very design, the system inherently creates more debt than money exists to repay it. It drives what the book calls a never-ending spiral of indebtedness.
How does anyone ever pay anything back then?
Well, the counterpoint is the value of labor. You, the individual, earn money by working, and those dollars circulate to pay interest. But the fundamental imbalance, all money created as debt, meaning there's always more debt than money remains.
Leading to what the author calls
institutionalized usury on a grand scale. The ability for a bank to create money from nothing, lend it, collect interest, without possessing the money first that's presented as deeply problematic, fundamentally shifting wealth from producers to lenders.
And this inherent imbalance, this money from debt system, leads us directly to something that affects every single one of us daily, often without us realizing it, inflation, which the source powerfully calls the hidden tax.
To understand inflation as this hidden tax, the author uses a great board game analogy.
Like Monopoly.
Exactly. So imagine you're playing, and suddenly, without any new properties or anything else being added to the board, the banker just doubles everyone's money supply.
Okay, everyone has more cash.
Right. But there's no more stuff to buy. So what happens? Players just bid the prices of the existing properties until they're, on average, twice as expensive.
Because the money's worth less.
Precisely. The key takeaway, as the author puts it, isn't that prices go up. The fundamental truth is the value of the money goes down. This reduction in the purchasing power of every dollar you hold, own, or earn is the hidden tax.
So when the government or the Fed expands the money supply, they're not making us richer collectively. They're just diluting the value of the money we already have, effectively taking a slice of our wealth, our savings, our income, without us even seeing it as a tax. It's stealthy.
Exactly. The source argues there are two main reasons the government even bothers with open, visible taxes like income tax, beyond just raising revenue. First, quite cynically, it's to perpetuate public ignorance, to stop people fully realizing inflation is a tax.
How does visible tax do that?
If the government just created money whenever it needed it, people would quickly question where it came from and why their money buys less and less. Having an income tax provides a necessary diversion, a tangible burden that draws attention away from the more insidious, invisible tax of inflation.
Okay, that's one reason. What's the second?
Second, the author claims that taxes, especially progressive income taxes, are used as weapons for elitist social planners to wage a quiet war on the middle class and redistribute wealth.
How so?
Not through free market choices, but through state coercion, overriding market forces in the name of social justice or equality. So taxation, in this view, isn't just about funding services, but about fundamentally reshaping society according to a central plan.
That's a very strong claim that taxation and inflation are tools for social engineering and control. And this hidden tax through inflation seems to have a doomsday mechanism built into federal finance.
Indeed, the author highlights that annual federal deficits are on a vertical climb, an unsustainable path leading to an ever-increasing national debt.
Right. We hear about the debt all the time.
And a staggering consequence is the interest payments on that debt. They consume a massive and growing portion of federal revenue. The book starkly points out that with these interest payments, nothing purchased by it. It's just paying interest on past borrowing.
Just servicing the debt.
By 1993, for instance, interest payments alone ate up 14% of total federal revenue. By 1998, it was projected to consume 100% of all income tax revenue.
Wow. All income tax just for interest.
That was the projection. It means a huge, potentially escalating chunk of what taxpayers provide just goes to serve as a debt that never shrinks, but compounds. A vicious cycle.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture,
it becomes clear, in the author's view, that this system isn't merely about managing money or stabilizing the economy as often presented. It's about controlling money, and through that, controlling society.
Which raises that important question.
Who truly benefits from this arrangement of perpetual debt and hidden taxation, and at whose expense? The source asserts a powerful law. When men are entrusted with the power to control the money supply, they will eventually use that power to confiscate the wealth of their neighbors.
A sobering thought.
It paints a picture where power over currency equates to power over people.
Okay, moving into part 3. The creature's global reach and consequences. This deep dive really expands from domestic finance to intricate international power dynamics. The author of The Creature from Jekyll Island asserts the Fed's creation wasn't just an American thing. It was deeply interwoven with global financial interests, particularly through what he calls the London connection and interlocking power.
Right. The source meticulously highlights J.P. Morgan's deep ties to England. The book details that Morgan's London firm was saved from ruin during the 1857 panic by the Bank of England.
Okay.
And the Bank of England itself, the author points out, had significant Rothschild influence. This leads some to suggest Morgan effectively served, maybe informally, as a secret Rothschild financial agent in the U.S.
So Morgan and Rothschild competitors on the surface, but maybe collaborators underneath.
That's the suggestion. Despite appearing as competitors, their close social ties, frequent communications, joint ventures, especially in things like railroad finance, point to a more cooperative, maybe even subtly subservient role for Morgan in the grand scheme of international finance, according to the source.
This is where the story truly takes that international turn, suggesting American financial policies weren't just about domestic needs, but were, according to the author, directly influenced by overseas interests, with real impacts here at home. How did this alleged relationship play out with the new Federal Reserve?
Crucially, Benjamin Strong, remember him from Jekyll Island, head of Morgan's Bankers Trust.
Yeah, key figure.
He became the first and arguably most powerful head of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The book details his rapid establishment of a profoundly close personal and professional relationship with Montague Norman,
head of the Bank of England.
The immensely powerful governor of the Bank of England, yes. This alliance lasted until Strong's death in 1928. The author contends this close bond meant Strong, who basically controlled the whole Fed system through his influence over open market operations, was potentially more concerned about the British economy's fortunes than purely American economic interests.
Wow. And what was the practical consequence of this alleged alignment for, say, the average American?
The book makes a pretty shocking claim that the Fed deliberately lowered American interest rates throughout the 1920s.
Why would they do that?
Strong himself, in a letter to Treasury Secretary Mellon in 1924 cited in the book, acknowledged the primary goal was to inflate the American dollar and raise prices here, specifically to make American goods more expensive relative to British ones.
To help Britain.
Allegedly, yes.
Oh,
To help Britain avoid politically unpopular measures like cutting wages, profits, welfare benefits back home. In essence, the Fed under Strong, the author alleges, was propping up the British economy and social structure at the direct expense of Americans.
So Americans were essentially nominated to suffer inflation and maybe the eventual crash to help the British system.
That's the argument presented. To maintain the British government and its powerful trade unions, it's an extraordinary assertion our own central bank working against American interests for another nation.
And this ties into a larger, even more unsettling pattern the source describes as the Rothschild formula for war and debt.
Indeed. The Creature from Jekyll Island details a long-standing tradition among certain international financiers, profiting immensely from both sides of armed conflicts.
Profiting from war itself.
The Rothschilds are cited as a prime example, operating a highly efficient private intelligence system that gave them crucial advance information. Nathan Rothschild, for instance, famously used his advanced knowledge of Wellington's victory at Waterloo in 1815.
How?
He subtly started selling British bonds on the London Exchange, making it look like Britain had lost. This triggered a massive selling panic among others.
Allowing him to buy cheap.
Exactly. Allowing him to then acquire England's entire debt at a tiny fraction of its true worth. This alleged cold objectivity, ruthlessness, indifference to patriotism or suffering, are presented as key traits behind their success and power.
So the Rothschild formula, as described, isn't just about profiting from wars that happen, but maybe implies a more active role, orchestrating.
According to the book, the proposed formula for perpetual war is quite chilling. First, finance both sides. Second, prevent either side from winning decisively unless one side is fundamentally hostile to the financier's interests and needs neutralizing.
Keep the conflict going.
And third, while always publicly talking peace and humanitarian goals, the unspoken true objective is perpetual war, because war generates immense national debt.
And debt generates interest payments for the financiers.
Exactly. Immense perpetual profits for those financing it. The system, the author claims, thrives on conflict and the resulting need for nations to borrow.
Okay, let's look at World War I through this lens, specifically the sinking of the Lusitania. We usually learn it was a key event pushing the U.S. into war, but The Creature from Jekyll Island suggests something much deeper, more calculated.
J.P. Morgan played a central, very lucrative role leading up to WWI. He was the main sales agent for Allied war bonds and the exclusive U.S. purchasing agent for war materials for Britain and France.
Profiting from both ends.
Handsomely. Commissions on the loans, commissions on the supplies bought with those loans. But by 1915, German U-boats were devastating Allied shipping, threatening defeat. This put Morgan in a bind.
His loans were at risk.
His considerable war loans were in jeopardy. Now, the source highlights a crucial, often overlooked detail about the Lusitania. It wasn't just a civilian passenger liner. In May 1913, long before the war, it was officially converted into an armed auxiliary cruiser. Extra armor, gun rings installed, shell racks for ammo. It was explicitly listed in British publications as an armed merchantman.
And the German embassy in Washington actually tried to warn Americans about this.
Yes, incredibly they did. April 22nd, 1915, days before the fatal voyage, the German embassy placed ads in over 50 U.S. newspapers, publicly warning passengers about the dangers, explicitly stating it carried ammunition and was a legitimate target.
Did the ads run?
Most were blocked. The State Department, under Secretary William Jennings Bryan, intervened, raised the threat of libel suits, successfully stopped most pagers. Only the Des Moines Register ran it on the requested date.
Wow.
Secretary Bryan shown ship manifests confirming huge amounts of ammo on board rifle cartridges. Shrapnel desperately tried to get President Wilson to issue a public warning.
But Wilson didn't.
No warning was issued. Wilson himself later privately admitted his foreknowledge of the cargo gave him many sleepless hours.
And the British Admiralty also played a suspicious role, according to the source, setting it up.
Absolutely. When Lusitania left New York, orders were to rendezvous with a British destroyer, the Juno, for escort near Ireland. But the Juno was called off last minute by the Admiralty, ordered back to Queenstown. Unexplained. To compound this, the Admiralty ordered Lusitania to cut speed, supposedly for coal conservation, even as it entered an area where a U-boat was known to be waiting.
Send it right into danger.
A British intelligence officer, Commander Kenworthy, later wrote damningly, "The Lusitania was sent at considerably reduced speed into an area where a U-boat was known to be waiting and with her escorts withdrawn." Plus, the author cites diver testimonies suggesting a massive internal explosion on the bow.
From the ammunition cargo.
Suggesting not just the torpedo, but possibly its ammo cargo detonated, worsening the disaster, sinking it faster.
And the narrative suggests Bryan's resignation as Secretary of State was a direct result of knowing this.
Indeed. Bryan resigned shortly after, specifically because, the source details, he couldn't in good conscience sign the official note condemning Germany. He knew the truth about the cargo and the lack of warning. His wife recalled his extreme restlessness, unable to sleep due to the moral dilemma.
So the U.S. enters WWI.
Right after Lusitania. Congress extends billions in credit to the Allies. The first advances on these loans immediately paid off J.P. Morgan's jeopardized debt.
Convenient.
And the Federal Reserve, now under Benjamin Strong's full control, as the author states, simply created the needed money through the Mandrake mechanism to pay Morgan, illustrating, in the author's view, the powerful, mutually beneficial partnership between political and monetary forces.
This isn't just disturbing history. It's presented by the author as a recurring pattern, a mechanism transforming chaos, even war, into concentrated wealth and power for a few. And this pattern, the source argues, leads right to the 1929 stock market crash, which the book provocatively calls a scientifically created panic.
Right. The author details how Fed policies in the 1920s directly fueled the speculation that led to the crash. For instance, in 1924, the Fed deliberately created $500 million in new money. Poof.
Okay.
Commercial banks, using fractional reserve, quickly turned that into over $4 billion in new credit, fueling this massive speculative boom in stocks and real estate.
They inflated the bubble.
Then the source alleges foreknowledge among central bankers about the bubble bursting. Montague Norman, Bank of England head, reportedly made a secret visit to the U.S. in February 1929, conferred extensively with Fed officers and Treasury Secretary Mellon.
What did they conclude?
The book surmises these powerful figures decided the bubble they'd inflated would rupture. And rather than fighting it, they chose to, well, facilitate its collapse.
And the book suggests they actually pulled the pin themselves, initiated the collapse.
According to the creature from Jekyll Island, yes. August 9, 1929, the Fed acted decisively. Increased the bank loan rate, making borrowing more expensive, simultaneously began aggressively selling securities, both actions designed to contract the money supply, drain reserves.
Squeezing credit.
Right. This quickly caused rates on brokers' loans, which fueled stock speculation, to jump dramatically to 20%. Less than 3 months later, October 29th, boom, stock market collapses. Wipes out thousands of unsuspecting investors. Triggers the Great Depression.
Devastating for the public.
Immense losses. However, the author contends, the insiders who were forewarned had converted their stocks into cash while prices were still high. They now became the buyers.
Buying assets cheap from the wreckage.
Exactly. Swooping in to acquire vastly undervalued assets. Giant holding companies like Marine Midland, Lehman Corporation were formed specifically for this, consolidating immense wealth and control.
So connecting this back.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author argues, far from protecting the public, the Federal Reserve System acts as a cartel, manipulating economic cycles, creating boom-bust for private gain. This, in the author's view, powerfully demonstrates that fundamental law. When men are entrusted with the power to control the money supply, they will eventually use that power to confiscate the wealth of their neighbors.
All right, let's turn our attention to Part 4, the path forward, avoiding the new feudalism. This section of The Creature from Jekyll Island takes us from the history and consequences of central banking to a much larger global agenda. The author introduces this concept of a new world order and ties it directly to institutions designed for international cooperation.
Right. This is where the narrative really broadens out. The source points to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, created at Bretton Woods in 1944 as primary instruments for ushering in what the author sees as global socialism.
Global socialism, that's a strong term.
It is. The book highlights the controversial origins, noting they were reportedly established largely through the influence of Fabian socialist John Maynard Keynes from Britain and notably communist Harry Dexter White.
Who was the chief American planner at Bretton Woods.
Correct, and later revealed to be part of an espionage ring linked to the Soviets. This context is important for the author's argument.
So their announced goals were pretty benign, right? Facilitate trade, stabilize exchange rates.
Exactly. Sounded good. But the source argues their unannounced true goals were far more ambitious and, well, alarming to many.
Which were?
The systematic elimination of the gold standard, removing any restraint on money creation, and the gradual establishment of world socialism, essentially planned global autonomy.
So again, the theme of beneficial institutions having hidden agendas.
Yes. The IMF and World Bank, in this view, aren't just lenders of last resort. They're described as actively funding totalitarian regimes worldwide.
Like who?
The book cites examples billions in loans to countries like Uganda, Zimbabwe, Argentina, Red China, which by 1987 was the IMF's second largest borrower. These loans, the source contends, don't alleviate poverty.
What do they do then, according to the author?
They perpetuate socialist systems, allow these regimes to allocate resources to military development or maintain tight control over their populations. The author alleges these loans are literally buying these countries and using our money to do it, indebting nations to these global institutions.
And how does this connect back to American power structures, national sovereignty?
The Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, a highly influential U.S. foreign policy think tank, is described by the author as an outgrowth of Cecil Rhodes' secret society, the Round Table.
Okay.
The CFR is painted as the most powerful group in America today, holding almost all of the key positions in government.
That's a bold claim.
Very. The author goes further, asserting the CFR openly calls for the weakening of America as a necessary step toward the greater good of building world government.
Weakening America for world government.
That's the interpretation presented. This takes the story from economics to geopolitics, suggesting a larger coordinated agenda impacting our daily lives, our national independence, in ways we might not realize, eroding sovereignty for global governance.
That is an incredibly serious claim, an influential group actively trying to weaken the U.S. And this ties into an even more disturbing concept the book presents. The report from Iron Mountain. What's that?
The report from Iron Mountain, published in 1966, is presented as a highly controversial, allegedly government-sponsored think tank study. It analyzed methods to perpetuate government power and control over citizens.
What did it conclude?
Its chilling conclusion, as detailed in the source, was that war was the only reliable means to achieve this historically. War served functions like economic stabilization, population control, social cohesion.
Okay, but what if there's no war, like in a world government scenario?
The report speculated that in such a world, it would be necessary to invent new, believable threats to control populations, justify resource waste, maintain stability.
Invent threats? Like what?
The author highlights the report's contemplation of creating manufactured crises, widespread environmental pollution, maybe even fabricating an alien invasion to maintain an external threat and justify centralized control.
Wow. That's chilling.
It raises that important question. Are we unwittingly consenting to a future where control, rather than freedom, defines our systems? This, the author warns, reflects the pessimistic scenario of a high-tech feudalism.
The idea of invented threats to manipulate populations is profoundly unsettling. What exactly does this pessimistic scenario of high-tech feudalism look like in practice as the author envisions it?
The source paints a grim picture after an orchestrated economic collapse. Imagine long lines at banks, but there's no cash. Most money is just electronic impulses.
Right. Digital money.
Printing presses can't keep up. This leads to a national emergency, a bank holiday declared by the president, freezes everything, commerce paralyzed, savings inaccessible or wiped out, people resorting to barter just to survive.
Chaos. And the proposed solution?
The proposed solution, as presented by the author, would be a new world currency called the Bancor, a name Keynes first proposed.
Backed by what? Not gold, presumably.
Not gold, backed by the assets of the world, including government bonds and, critically, millions of acres of wilderness lands deposited into a UN environmental bank.
How do they get the land?
Through things like debt for nature swaps, national debts forgiven in exchange for control over natural resources.
So this crisis leads to massive centralization of control under global authorities.
Dispossessing individual.
Precisely. The consequences laid out are stark. Individual homes effectively owned by the government, people living there at the government's pleasure, subject to relocation.
Wow.
Wage price controls rigorously instituted by a UN agency. Vital industries seized, nationalized. New work armies, like a UN Full Employment and Environmental Restoration Army, FEE, forcing people into labor for basic food and shelter.
That is dystopian.
Ultimately, society divided, rulers and ruled, privilege based on birthright. A true high-tech feudalism. The source even draws a chilling parallel to Orwell's 1984, presenting it not as satire, but as an accurate projection. Perpetual war, or its substitutes, used to control populations, justify waste, maintain artificial scarcity, poverty, ignorance as tools of control. That is profoundly pessimistic, a chilling vision. But thankfully, the creature from Jekyll Island doesn't leave us there. The deep dive also offers what it calls a realistic scenario for reversal, a path away from this potential new feudalism. What would that involve? Where does the author suggest we start?
The first crucial step in this realistic scenario is really understanding the Fed's nature. The author repeats, it's not truly private, not purely government. It's a unique hybrid.
An association of big banks with special privileges.
Granted by Congress. And most importantly, the book stresses, because Congress created it, Congress can extinguish it. This is critical. The system, however entrenched, isn't inevitable. It's a human construct, changeable by human action.
Okay, so if it can be dismantled, what are the specific, actionable proposals for reform the author advocates, moving us away from this alleged control system?
Several key proposals. Start with immediately repealing all legal tender laws.
What would that do?
Empower individuals. Allow people to freely accept, reject, or discount Federal Reserve notes as they wish, not be legally forced to accept them.
Okay. What else?
Second, freeze the present supply of Federal Reserve notes. Third, reestablish sound money. Define the real dollar in precious metal content, preferably back to the historical standard of 371.25 grains of silver.
Silver standard.
Primarily silver, yes.
Yeah.
Fourth, establish gold as an auxiliary reserve, fully interchangeable with silver, but at a free market ratio, not a fixed one which becomes unstable.
Those are pretty radical changes to money itself. What about the banks? Their role in creating money?
The fifth proposal, maybe the most impactful, require 100% reserve banking.
Meaning?
Banks offering on-demand deposits, like your checking account, must keep 100% of that money in their vaults or at the central bank. They become safekeepers, charging fees, not lending those funds out.
So they can't create money through lending demand deposits?
Correct. Time deposits, savings accounts could still be invested or loaned out, earning interest, but wouldn't be instantly redeemable. This separates banking into two distinct functions, custody and investment, prevents creating new money from debt, forces banks to lend only money they actually have.
And beyond banking reform, other societal changes.
Sixth, drastically cut government spending and debt. Eliminate doomsday mechanisms like entitlements, which drive unsustainable spending. Reduce reliance on debt creation.
Makes sense.
And seventh, restore national independence. Exit organizations like the UN. Rescind treaties leading to disarmament and economic interdependence. The goal isn't isolationism, but self-sufficiency, independent action, avoiding entanglement in global structures that might not share American values or interests.
So it's clear the currents we're navigating are strong. And the author presents a very specific, radical course correction. The question for you, the listener, is, do we let these currents carry us toward that new feudalism, or do we chart a challenging but potentially liberating new course? What would the transition actually look like, practically?
The source acknowledges it would be tough. A severe economic readjustment uses the phrase whitewater ahead. Definitely a hangover period as the economy unwinds from decades of debt money, adjusts to honest money.
What would that feel like?
Immediate impact might be a significant reduction in money supply, meaning the purchasing power of each dollar rises, prices for goods fall. Deflation.
Inflation is usually seen as bad.
It's challenging for debtors, yes.
Okay.
But the source frames it as a necessary, ultimately beneficial correction. This difficult process, however, would lead to a system with honest money, no national debt, government only spends real taxes, and an economy free from the boom-bust cycles of inflation and artificial stimulus. A fundamental healing process towards sustainable prosperity.
And what's the call to action for you, the listener, in all this, for those who resonate with this vision?
Active, informed participation is key. First, become self-informed. Dedicate time, resources, read books, listen, attend seminars on these crucial topics.
Educate yourself.
Second, become a pamphleteer. Share this information, these ideas. Engage in reasoned discussion. Third, join forces with like-minded individuals. strength in numbers. Fourth, use politics effectively. The author explicitly calls to remove the big spending internationalists from office and replace them with men and women dedicated to sound money and national independence.
And finally,
Prepare for potential economic shifts. Personal survival measures. Ensure your own resilience. The future, after all, the author concludes, will be what we collectively choose to make it. Hashtag tag outro.
so if our monetary and political systems are, as the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island so powerfully argues, really a reflection of human choices, human motivations, then what untapped power do we hold to fundamentally alter that reality?
It's a big question.
This deep dive has revealed a narrative of power, secrecy, and the profound, often hidden impact of financial systems on our lives. From our daily purchases right up to global conflicts.
It really highlights that the system we live in isn't some unchangeable force of nature. It's a complex construct of human design. Understanding its origins, its mechanics, as presented here, it empowers us to think critically about where we're heading as a society.
Right. The question isn't just what happened, but what happens next, given this deeper understanding.
Exactly.
And this deep dive into The Creature from Jekyll Island is truly just the beginning. Understanding these incredibly complex, impactful topics takes time. We strongly encourage you to seek out more information, read widely, engage critically, form your own informed conclusions.
Let your curiosity lead you.
We'd love to hear your reflections on this deep dive, what resonated most, or what new questions it sparked for you. Your engagement is what makes these discussions valuable, helps us all become more well-informed.
Absolutely. Share your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with another journey into the depths of crucial topics that shape our world.